delight to be hearing from Joshva Raja, who is one of the co-deans at the Oxford Center for Religion and Public Life, and also one of the co-editors of the Handbook of Theological Education in World Christianity, which was released 10 years ago in 2010. Dr. Raja, we're extremely grateful to be hearing from you today.
I like to share my screen with you, and I'll just introduce a few things, what I think from my limited experience of both editing and theological education that can lead to a discussion today. When we started this book, basically, it came up like in an accidental God's providence, I should say. Okay, I think we did bring this together as the first venture, and printed it out in 2010 and released it at Edinburgh conference. And then since then, 4 publishers have published it, and now it's available in a PDF file, free of cost, by Regnum. And we, succeeded in many ways to bring worldwide authors across a wide range of denominations and a wide range of people who experience, and a wide range of topics as well. And but we had also limitations. Many of the people who sent articles, they were not up to the mark, or some of them did not respond. And so we put together what was available at that time. And so since then, what? Since then, as I have highlighted in my own write-up, I hope you all had it. I just like to highlight a few things. We have an enormous growth of theological institutions in global south, in many parts of the world. I think recently we have started the research center in Myanmar. We ourselves from the Oxford Center, we funded that research center through Association of Theological Education in Myanmar, along with FTSCA and ATSCA cooperation. And 36 colleges. But they are also able to serve the remaining another 30 colleges under Asia Theological Association. So there is a growth of theological institutions in many parts of the world, and they are demanding that there's a lot of need for faculty development and other areas, a library and others. While there is also sad stories that we hear in the global north, that recently one of the very interesting colleges in Nottingham, which used to serve a large constituencies of evangelical churches in Europe, sadly had to close down. And so this is a challenge since then. When we are hearing this story regularly, the closing down of colleges in the West, sad side of the theological education. And then some of the colleges are quickly shifting to non-residential programs or mixed mode or part-time training. Lots of words are coming up because they see that residential programs are increasingly expensive, and it's very difficult to maintain those things. Some of the churches have seen being a resident and being trained in the resident theological formation is the only way to form a person, particularly in terms of mentoring, in terms of their attendance in the chapel and all sorts of things. But now they have to rethink completely a different way of doing this ministerial and theological formation. And I think, the other thing, I just don't want to repeat it, Pentecostal and evangelical are mushrooming. That's also, one problem comes, sustainability and survival of some of these colleges. And the way they also teach, it's also challenging. Some of them, it's difficult to draw the line between the cults and the theology. So I heard recently some of the theological, the World Communion for Reformed Churches, they asked me to come and I couldn't go. But they had this, theology, a conference in Africa recently challenging some of these theologies. And that was quite fascinating. So for me, it's also very important that now there's a lots of interest by theological education by extension. That's quite becoming popular. And I have seen number of theological colleges in the West and in West. I'm sorry to divide this West and West, so, if you don't mind. There's a lot of increase in theological education by extension. And how effectively it works, it is under question, but we are all trying, including us. We have started a PhD program, and time to time, Zoominars and all that works to some extent very well. So in that sense, it seems to be working, in many cases. And for me, it also brings a lot of challenges with the learning and teaching models. Much of the theological institution are emphasizing the placement-based or experience-based reflective journey. Particularly, many of them begin to look like it's a journey for meanings of being a good disciple of life and of God in particular context with experience and action-based models. I think it is also not experience in your own particular context, even cross-cultural, other church, and other social context. And that brings you more wisdom in terms of equipping oneself wider. And these are some of the things that have recently emerged, I suppose, in my observation. I should tell you, I acknowledge that I have borrowed some of these ideas from the whole analysis that my colleague David Esterlin has done through his survey around the world, and he has been in touch with me. I should, ascribe these things to him as well, because some of these things come from his own study. He was one of, editor colleague in this book. We call it the big killer book, but I'm happy that many of the theological institutions are just referring to it time to time. The one other thing I like to say is, using technology and online resources bring more hermeneutics, new way of doing theology, and new convergence, new participatory, which is challenging our regular way of learning and teaching, and which is very interesting because I don't know, people know better than me sometimes that how this new technology provides a new challenge. And one of the interesting points that we are facing nowadays is theology for all. How do we develop theology for all? And that is, I like to say that very importantly, because for me, I have, we developed something called Global Institute for Leadership Development here in Barnabas Fund, along with my colleagues. My colleague, Dr. Prasad, is leading it. And he is developing courses for everyone in the church, from certificate to diploma to Bachelor of Ministry. Whether we could translate this the structure into more flexible and non-formal way so that we can reach out not only audience, but also even the preachers, Bible study leaders, and some of the very grassroots level leaders. This is, I think I'm happy that Prasad is here also aboard. So, it's quite an interesting challenge that it brings. I think we should think about it even within the theological institution, whether somewhere we can accomplish. I know that many of the colleges are already doing this. I think just to highlight what I said, it's kind of, we are in the tension of vocation versus profession. Sometimes, I think the old question being asked again, this is not a new question which I'm raising. It's a professional skills, or are we emphasizing this ministerial and missional formation that we are into it? And it's again residential versus non-residential, classroom-based and practice-oriented, fixed curricula. Why should we have the old fixed curricula, structured curricula? Can we go for flexible curricula, which should, because you see, we are training people in Bangladesh who are mainly converts from Islam. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for us without going to a proper college, without following a proper structured curricula. How can we develop a flexible curricula for them that they could lead the house group and the invisible churches in Bangladesh? That's a very interesting challenge. And, you know, just to summarize what I said, a few things. I am also facing very interesting in some of the colleges where I have been universities, Birmingham University and Free University of Amsterdam, where I have been teaching and supervising, which is quite fascinating to see the Western theology departments are slowly merging into religion, philosophy, and ethics departments in many places. And that is really challenging. In the East, we are again, you know, struggle with accreditation and affiliation to the universities. You know, one of the questions being asked time to time, ATA, Asia Theological Association, and Sarambur, who recognize these university certificates? Suddenly people ask, then we are in difficulty. So this is one of the areas that we are really discussing and trying to find a way out. And academic exercise, of course, this is my criticism. We moved sometime from academic exercise to ideological driven and emotionally related studies. That is I make the point. I think we can discuss on that if any questions. And sometimes it is hard for the writers from the developing nations to get their writings published. It's a bit hard for us. So we are looking at some support from the West. You know, even for me, of course, you know, we have published. Some of the emerging writers are really finding it hard, and you know, so that's the thing. And I think what are we doing? I have already highlighted that. I am just going to think about what can we do in order to address some of these emerging issues after 2010 book. I'm thinking of trying another edited monumental work on new emerging trends and context, especially focused on theological education by extension. There's lots and lots of people like TEEN in Nepal, TEEP in Middle East, we have the TE emerging, and in North Africa we have. So, you know, that may be something that we can put together. I just typed to Deutsch. I don't know whether Deutsch is there, and he is positive about it. So I think we could develop one on that area. And also I'm thinking of networking, accreditation, affiliation, whether the West and the East can come together as a global body of Christ in order to cherish and nourish our theological education together. As a part of our calling and mission. And sustainability of theological education is one of the major challenges that we have. And I think one of the other final point I would like to make is faculty development in the South. We need help. Actually, I should remind you, Bishop Azariah's call, we need friends. So those days we used to have visionary, mission-minded friends in the global North who helped us to come and finish our PhD and go back home. And I think I'm not saying that we should depend completely for our faculty development in the North, but we are already developing South-to-South collaborations. Like, you know, now many of our students are doing research in South Africa, Pretoria and Stellenbosch, and even we are developing a network with Cameroon and Sarambur and Ata. So, but in spite of that, I would still say that we would like to have some faculty developed in the West to keep that body of Christ growing together in a more mature way through theological education. I think, with my humbleness, I should say I have highlighted a few things about it. So I have given the text. There are a few areas which I have not highlighted, the learning methods and other things. But I think I will leave to others to add or raise any issues in this presentation. Nice to see many friends around. Great. I'll hand it over back to my friend. And I think there are people like H.S. Wilson is a very well experienced professor. And Christoph is, and Free and others, all are well experienced. Please add to my little knowledge that I brought to the table. And I humble myself that it's a privilege to sit on this video with you guys. Yeah, and please bring your wisdom onto the table.
We should first thank Dr. Raja. Thank you so much. Applause does not work very well on Zoom, but we applaud like so. Thank you so much, Dr. Raja. This is an open time now for us to isolate the issues reflecting on the things that Dr. Raja has presented. Please remember that everything will be transcripted and available by transcript. Who would like to speak first?
Hello, my name is Isabel Piri. I am one of the editors of the Handbook on Theological Education in Africa, which was a follow-up, from your handbook, because we found it very inspiring, and we thought, we needed to do one for Africa, which we completed in 2014. And the issues you have raised are the same issues that we face in Africa. And I'm really glad that, you are thinking of another publication, that will address the current issues. One of the issues which I want to highlight is ecumenical theological education. Because one of the problems that I see happening in Africa and in most of the other countries that I've visited on behalf of the World Council of Churches is that we are moving away from ecumenical theological education, and we are now emphasizing denominational theological education. For me, this is a loss, really. One, it challenges the issues of sustainability, because, the denominations, like the ones I know in Africa, would be small, and they still want to have their own theological education with limited books and limited faculty. And therefore, it becomes difficult to get them accredited, right? Because it's a small institution and it does not meet the national educational standards. So it's a huge challenge which we need to address. And the second one, which is also connected to that one, is the issue of turning theological colleges into universities. So you would have, let's say, the Presbyterians, they have their own, in Malawi, because I come from Malawi, they have their own theological institution, which used to be ecumenical. We had the Anglicans, coming, the Baptist and the Church of Christ. And now each one of them have got their own. And they are also turning their theological seminaries into universities. And by so doing, they are marginalizing theology, okay, and emphasizing other subjects that would attract more students, like law, medicine, and all these others. And for me, what I see is, we are destroying our own theological institutions. So if the churches cannot prioritize theological institutions, the government is not going to do it for us. So this is an area which I feel so passionate about, encouraging churches to take theological education seriously, but also not just the denominational one, but consider ecumenical theological education so that we can put our resources together and improve the quality of what we are offering, out there. I'm also one of those, who promote theological education by extension, not only because it offers opportunity for women, to study theology, because we still have theological institutions that are limited to ordained pastors, male. So for most women to study theology, you either go to theological education by extension or you go to government universities, right? So theological education by extension needs to be extended, and we need to emphasize the education of the laity, through theological education by extension. Yeah, for the time being, I would want to offer those and then give opportunities, to others to speak too. I can come back later because I also wanted to emphasize the theological education of the grassroots preachers. Okay, when I was at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, we had a program for theological education of pastors from Pentecostal and African independent churches. Mm-hmm. And we had a huge response because it offered, the grassroots preachers an opportunity to come together to prepare a sermon for the next Sunday together, right? So you had a team of people, preparing together, and that improved the quality of the theologies, that are being preached out there. And this is something that I would like to see developed further. Thank you.
I think that's a wonderful comment. I think you are very affirming, and I think if I may say, it's important the church takes up somehow the responsibility of supporting theological education. I like that point. Please.
Thank you very much, Joshua and Isabel. I can continue in line with what both of you said, and would like to raise in the first round 6 points and then others later. But the first is this observation of denominationalism, which is really, in my view, one of the big challenges and also bottlenecks. I had a chance after I'm emeritus now in Basel University, theological faculty. I'm teaching in Nigeria, in China, in Russia, and in Leeds, Beckett, UK. So I can compare a bit, and this denominationalism leads to really a weakening because too many small institutions competing with each other, not recognized, and I think we should address that really proactively. I'm sure a number of these denominational seminaries will close and have closed some of them. The second point is the question of speed. I observe, and I work now a lot with universities, private universities, state universities, and I see a slow development or slow decision-making procedures in some of the theological education institutions, whereas in the secular, so to say, is it state or private universities world, the speed counts. And I think we should find a mechanism and also talk to the church leaders how we can speed up decisions and developments, because we lose ground by the fact that we just, for each decision, we take 5 years, 10 years. I exaggerate, I know, but I would like to highlight the speed factor. I'm in Geneva in the same building as Isabel in the Ecumenical Center, and around us, what I see, and I attend a lot of conferences now on AI and ethics, AI and new technologies, AI in education. It's just unbelievable what's going on in the technology world. And when I am in, as one of the only theologian normally in these conferences, I feel that we are like cut off from this kind of world. Of course, I exaggerate. The third point is I would also underline what Isabel said about university accreditation and these procedures. For financial reasons, of course, there is a need to have the paying faculties, management, medicine, economics, law. And I see it in where I teach, but also in my alma mater, St. Paul's University in Kenya. I see the challenge for theology. And I think it can also be a chance. It's not only a challenge. The chance is how can we then, if we have a Protestant university, for example, or an ecumenical university or Catholic university, how can the theological faculty play a role across the faculties? So a kind of missionary approach, if you like, where the theological faculty may be small, but it can have an outreach within these institutions. And I also see that the willingness, with exceptions, of course, India is a different case at the moment with all the nationalist Hindu movements, but in many other countries, theology is still welcome. Ethics is very welcome across the faculties. So there is a chance, but we have to kind of reorient our focus. Pastor's education is very important, but also how can we have the necessary faculty members who are able to dialogue with medicine, bioethics, technology and ethics, and theology, and all the rest. My fourth remark is on online. That was mentioned by Joshua also, and it's true that distant education is of course on the move, but I see also, and I talk with a lot of vice chancellors on different continents, I see a growing hesitation. So it's not the end of the story, I think. So because of quality issues, I was in Moscow with the president of the Association of Private Universities, and he told me that after 1990 to 2000, 600 private universities were created in Russia, mainly online, but 500 in the meantime in the last 2 years were closed because the government said quality is not reached. We cannot allow to have low-level online universities. So there's a pressure for online teaching to have good quality. And I think we can reach that in theology, but we need to be aware that online is not just easy. You put the MOOC online and it's done. My fifth remark is about Europe and EU and US. I think in the North we have the challenge that I may speak from the Swiss perspective, but I think in other European countries it's similar, that the theology is almost no more present in public life. So the theological faculties are seriously educating pastors and so on, but where is the theological voice in the public debate, in the media and whatever you imagine? So how can we encourage theological faculties and theological education to be more present in public life and debates? I think the Pentecostals and the evangelicals do it better than the mainland churches. So I suffer from my own university in Basel. I mean, this is almost not present in the public life. My last point for this round is women. You, Isabel, mentioned it. I observe that the percentage of women in theological studies is quite high, at least in those institutions where I'm attached to. But the challenge is then related partly with the women's ordination. So what next? To have women in education, in theological education is good, but there are so many frustrated, excellent women who would like to serve in the church as pastors, as bishops, but they are hindered to do that. So we need also, when we talk about theological education, we need to talk to the leadership in order to give them the respective place and voice. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are good points which you made. Particularly, I should say that it's in India. We have many women who have come to theological education and have gone without jobs from northeast part of India, but they have gone for higher qualifications. But now most of the theological instructors' job are filled by them. So we will have many women from northeast part of India. But the Baptists don't ordain them back in northeast, sadly. But then they got the theological instructor. All the Baptist pastors have to learn under them now. That's a good sign.
Sorry, firstly, to apologize. I was late in coming into the conversation. I had problems with my internet connection. I'm attending another conference at a location where the internet isn't so good and it kept dropping me. I wanted to pick up, ironically, perhaps some comments about online education, which is my particular area of interest. Yes, I agree with Christoph that issues around quality are important, but I think also online education has huge potential for linking up institutions and colleges where there is a lack of resources. One of the projects I'm working on at the moment is linking up colleges in East Africa, where you have small Methodist theological colleges with 2 or 3 faculty, maybe 60 students working part-time, and the potential of online education to link together the various colleges, offering combined courses, pooling resources, and then I think online education has potential when used with good quality control and with good good technological support, has a potential to meet a lot of or overcome a lot of the difficulties, particularly in countries in the global south. With the development of 4G mobile phone technology, a lot can be done over mobile phones, for example, with high quality software. So I would just want to emphasize that online education is not everything, but it certainly has a contribution to make. Perhaps also to note that I think there are certain elements of theological education which I don't think can be done online. There's a mentoring process, a process of spiritual formation that really requires personal and pastoral interaction.
Yes, I think I support that as well. At the same time, we also try to provide online resources through our program called Global Institute for Leadership Development. I know that Globe Ethics, which Christoph does, also provide quite a large range of resources online. But we are buying things like JSTOR and EBSCO to provide at free of cost to those who cannot have access. So it would be quite good to use such facilities. I think Dr. Prasad is here, and we have already been making it available to the people who cannot afford to buy these things. And we are happy indeed to share that. And also we need to publicize and popularize Globe Ethics much more to the students in the Global South, which they can access free of cost. Besides, that also helps online learning alongside. We just bought one more software, which is called Bible Museum, which is very good to learn. So we are providing it free of cost to anybody who learns online. We have got the copyright outside America to anybody around the world. So we would like to make it available free of cost. The only problem is we want to see it being used and not sold. So, you know, that would be very important for us. And I think Prasad was showing it. Can you show that, please? And I think Deutrich Werner is here. He is one of my colleagues whom we know, four of us, we thought on Imagine this book. And he would bring certainly a good input into it.
So warm greetings to everybody. It's exciting that I meet so many friends and colleagues from former periods as we have been working in WCC as the director of ETE program. As I have to disappear briefly again and had a bit struggle with technology here, just 3 additional perspectives which are very close to what Joshua Raja and also the other friends Isabel Piri and Christoph and others have shared. First, we are facing dramatic demographic challenges in terms of the need for global theological education. Churches in the North Atlantic are shrinking. Usually populations in Western countries are growing older, like myself. And if you look at the numbers of those who are enrolling for theological studies, you will see that the vast majority of younger candidates for theological studies are in the global South, whereas the vast resources for theological education in terms of teaching staff and also library resources are still located in the North. I think a new model of ecumenical sharing of resources is urgently needed and demands for a world conference, because if we look back into the famous periods of TEF, which was the Theological Education Fund, it was more than 45 global mission agencies who came together to engage at that period, in the early period of decolonialization, in an exercise of ecumenical sharing of resources. The situation has become so dramatic with the demographic shifts in the composition of world Christianity that I would recommend for a broad initiative to bring together major players from WCC circles, from evangelical circles, as well as from charismatic and independent church circles, to seek for a new future of theological education and sharing of resources, which includes faculty development programs, because I feel pain in my soul if I get letters from young, very gifted scholars from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, all demanding for support for theological education, for doing MTH or Ph.D. students, but there are no proper resource sharing mechanisms available. Second item, secularization, de-Christianization, and theological education. It was a leading scholar on African Christianity who worked also in Aberdeen, who once has talked about the 20th century as the period of the biggest accession of world Christianity and the biggest recession of world Christianity. And that refers to the dramatic growth of African Christianity and Southern Christianities on the one hand, and the biggest recession, which means withdrawal and diminishing of Christianity in countries of the global West. This also is reflected in a different mindset in secular universities. We had once a big Oslo conference on theological education, where the General Secretary of WC had delivered a major speech on the future of theological education in Europe. And one of the key observations, as Joshua has indicated, is a transformation between theological education and a move towards religious studies. So while I'm not arguing here at all against religious studies, I would still keep the position that theology proper, which means confessional theological reflection, is a vital and independent part of the university setting, not only in Europe, but in the whole of the globe. And we should stand up for a common defense of the discipline of proper Christian theological reflection in the future of Western and global universities. That is not to be taken for granted, because we swim against the tide. And last point, and very briefly I stop, we need a new coalition towards wider ecumenism in theological education. We have a diversified composition of world Christianity, charismatic churches, Pentecostal churches, independent churches, quite a lot of AICs, as we call them in Africa, have come up, and they also present a significant contribution to the witness of the church and to social ethics and social witness of the church, but they lack theological training, although the younger generation of their leaders is very eager to study theology also in mainline churches settings. I think we should listen to the task, come over to Macedonia and help us. This call nowadays is being mentioned, is being articulated by these minority churches, which are to some extent outside the Christianity mainstream, and also in some cases often outside the existing ecumenical networks. But I think we should listen to these churches while be critical about some trends on Christian fundamentalism, which we have in many denominations as well. We ought to listen to those who would like to do proper and highly reflective and advanced theological reflection from these churches. And a new act of a broader coalition and wider ecumenism for the theological education in the future of world Christianity is urgently demanded. I don't know whether you have talked about the forthcoming assembly of WCC, because I was cut off when Isabel Piri was speaking, but I hope that the new assembly of WCC, which is invited to take place in Karlsruhe in next September, will make space available for discussing future strategic priorities for theological education, including the collaboration with something which is designed now, that is a new Getty project for the World Council of Churches Assembly. Thanks a lot for listening, and thanks a lot for joining this very exciting panorama. Thank you.
Very good. I think it was very good input, Deutrich. And even though we grow old, we have not lost the enthusiasm. You come with the same spirit, Deutrich. Very good, well done. And I should say that this one to you, that we had 2 conferences on the funding agencies we brought together, one in Birmingham, one in Hamburg, you remember? So I think we must think about that also as one of the possibilities in future. The funding agencies of theological education coming together for strategical thinking, along with the people from the South, make their voices heard.
First of all, I want to thank you for the helpful mapping and valuable points that you have made, Dr. Raja, on the state of theological education, which as I can confirm with my own experience, but somewhat implicitly, in a sense that I'm particularly interested, and I'm representing several institutions involved in doctoral level education and studies. I'm the senior supervisor in Free University in Amsterdam via International Baptist Theological Studies Center, in London School of Theology, and in Acadia Divinity College in Canada. And at the same time, I'm leading as a rector an evangelical institution in Sofia, Bulgaria. But I'm speaking from Moldova, where the current 3rd doctoral colloquium of countries of the post-Soviet space came together to establish a center for doctoral training of their own constituencies. And these are 9 countries with more than 56 educational institutions who are pulling their resources together to develop a PhD and Doctor of Ministry program for Eastern Europe. And this is a fascinating development in a space, in an area, talking about secularization, where for 75 years, theology was taken off any kind of curriculums. And even today in Russia, it is not seriously considered as a part of academic curriculum. Happily, in Ukraine, it is not the situation. So the Ukrainian context is quite different. There is an amazing opening here for training doctoral students. Why it is so interesting to us? I'm also representing Lanham Partners scholarship team or scholarship program that provides funding for doctoral studies of majority world candidates. And from year to year, we're getting more and more applications for doctoral studies. And by that, I can confirm that there is a very active academic life on the grassroots in different countries that needs a very serious faculty development, which can be provided only by giving additional support for doctoral development and faculty development in these institutions. And an interesting also trend that I observe is the development of regional centers. In the past, we used to send our doctoral candidates in United Kingdom, in United States, in Australia, so that they can get a proper education there. But today, you can do that in credible institutions in Francophone Africa, in Anglophone Africa, in India, and in Eastern Europe. So we are very much interested in developing regional centers rather than helping a particular person to achieve a doctoral status or get a doctoral degree. And one issue that struck a chord with me is Isabel's and Christopher's concern about women in theological education. Yes, there are women here and there. They are actively studying. In the institution that I'm a guest at the moment, more than half of the students are women. But when you looked at the faculty makeup, there is none, or there are very few. So what kind of efforts we can put and encourage the faculties and the theological institutions to make the best use of these talented women to get into the teaching of theological education, not being recipients of theological education. So these are just several points that I would like to make. I like what Christoph has mentioned about the situation in Moscow and the online and private university education that inflicted this country in the past. Now the Russian government is taking quite serious measures to require a certain level of quality or quality assurance of theological education. Some look at it as an attempt politically to suppress, especially the evangelicals, but because it is cross-denominational, my Russian-speaking colleagues were telling me that it's not a political action, but it is an attempt to raise the level of the delivery of theological programs to measure up with those expected from the state universities, and which raises a very serious issue about the accreditation or cross-border accreditation or regional accreditation of theological programs. There are a number of theological programs around, but very few can claim that they are solidly accredited by credible accreditation bodies. In Europe, we are trying through the European Council of Theological Education to lift up the standards of accreditation of evangelical theological education by aligning up with the standards of European network of quality assurance agencies, and to become one of those recognized by this network so that we can provide credible accreditation and quality of the programs that are given by institutions in the Middle East, in North Africa, and Europe, Central and Eastern and Western Europe. These are some observations.
Very good, very good. I think you highlighted a very interesting point that in the name of quality, some of the teachings can be curtailed. That's quite a challenging thing. But while we all want quality, but not to restrict some teachings. That's a very interesting point you made.
I am David Samuel from Chapter. Thank you, Dr. Joshua. Thank you for that presentation. This is the first time I am attending a Zoom conference, and I am happy for this opportunity to hear from all of you. I am involved with theological education by extension, primarily in India, for several years. So many of the things that you said are relevant to us. Thank you again for this interest in theological education by extension, which reaches out to local churches and those who are traditionally not able to get opportunity to study theology. And interestingly, many of the church members tend to have very folk theology and interpret scriptures in a very, sometimes with superstitions. So I think theological education at the local church level, especially with the emerging churches, becomes a priority. And Ph.D. has been offering these courses. In fact, last week we had a graduation for about 600 students. Again, next month we will have for another 300. So we are really reaching out to evangelists, catechists, village preachers, Bible men, and particularly our lower level programs, but the foundational and certificate programs reach out to women. In fact, more women students study these programs. Of the 12,000 students we have, maybe about 7,000 are women. But of course, the higher level programs like BTH, MDiv, and MTH, we have more men students. There is something, especially about this higher level programs, accreditation or affiliation that you have raised is an important issue, because we initially offered some courses validated initially by Oxford University and then by Wales University. And then we tried to do some with Fuller, but all these have not succeeded. So if any effort is made in which universities from the West or theological institutions from the West can really accept or relate to this sort of programs, which we have difficulty within Indian context itself because of the situation of the church, it will be very helpful, because from the West there are a lot of possibilities. We have some experience of running these things, but theological education by extension is still considered not very academic. So though University of Wales and Oxford have given degrees in one of the other things I want to just emphasize is developing study materials continues to be a challenge. Due to somehow in India, as it is the sister from Sister Isabel, I think, Dr. Isabel has pointed out, a lot of denominational fragmentation in terms of theological education, but at least theological education by extension in India is not fragmented so much that Ph.D. continues to be a major organization for most of the denominational churches. But with help of missionaries from the Western countries, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, we are able to, with the Indians within India, we are able to develop courses. But such assistance or partnership is now less and less. So that is an area of course materials, because courses developed in India are now used in Pakistan, in Gulf countries, in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and other courses. So some effort in developing course materials would be good. But also one point you raised is important, as changing circumstance need calls for changing curriculum, some sort of ways by which all the things that you have raised, grounding in Bible, theological responsibility, contextual sensitivity and relevance, spiritual formation, character formation, how all these can be integrated and offered at different levels continues to be a challenge. I am very grateful for this opportunity to hear from all of you, and I hope some of these discussions that happens through your initiative will bear fruit in different parts of India, the world, also in India. Thank you very much.
Rio.
Thank you. I was also one of the authors of the book, and after 10 years, I'm no more Dean of the Faculty of Theology, but our institution is now called School of Theology and Religious Studies. So it shows the development which is also in Estonia as a part of Eastern Europe, very common with the Western part of Europe. And I think merges between institutions has been one of the processes that has taken place during the last 10 years. And my experience is that it has actually helped for ecumenical cooperation, because in some cases, during the harsh accreditation process, also the different confessions had to cooperate in reorganizing the theological education in a way that some of the education could be made together. So we have less institutions now, and we have less students now. That's the result of the accreditation from one side and also the demographic processes. But I can say that we have avoided probably the stress of denominational education in that way. But we can also say that, of course, the secularization has worked a lot on the education and the trend of education, so that religious studies is more favored in this way. But I think the cooperation is one of the key words, cooperation between different confessions and also cross-border cooperation. Still, the difficulty is in Baltic states, for example, different languages. Some students are still very keen to use their native language. Study of foreign languages is still not on the level that it could be expected. So I think that cooperation between different institutions and different confessions is the solution in a situation of recession, which was described in Europe particularly. Thank you.
I think Christoph would like to say first action. Christoph, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just about action. I think from the side of Globe Ethics Net, we continue to look at offers for online teaching and materials. So the online library, we just shifted to a new technology platform in terms of improving the visibility. So that is, I think, still an offer we should use. As you said, Joshua, it's free access to theological material is very important, and I'm very thankful to Henry Wilson and also David Field and others in the round who support that very substantially. The second action, I think it would be good to have a course across theological institutions, which we are working on, which is on asset management. We know that many pastors have the responsibility for huge assets sometimes in the church, but are not trained as such. They do not need to become an accountant, but they need to understand what is asset management. And we published with the support of Bread for the World. We had now 4 years of discussion, of trainings. African Church has its handbook, where we also have a curriculum of 12 modules for theological students on asset management, but also theological reflection behind. I think that would help. Another one is, which is that several of you mentioned, the whole funding issue. We know that funding from the North is no more available as it should, but we need to shift from donation-based also to investment-based. Now the challenge, and I'm working in another foundation in Geneva Gabe Foundation, on now faith-based investments, and that means how to bring, for example, church pension funds to, say, investing in a theological seminary or in a university is part of your mission. Instead of investing it at the stock market and losing money in New York, why don't you invest in India or in Africa or wherever it's needed in theological education? Now, that's not easy, we know, but it's feasible. It's feasible. I could bring a number of concrete examples. So we are opening, together with the All Africa Conference of Churches, we are discussing an ecumenical fund, which would allow not only theological seminaries, but broader churches and church-related institutions to get access to investments. I just leave it with a keyword. It's not easy, but I think we have to maybe also have a special workshop on that, or we had a conference in January together with WCC on the topic of faith-based investments. And I think that could also be helpful for theological institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Joshua, for your paper. Thank you for the many other contributions. I've been an excellent listener, and I thought I should share something about the journey that I've gone through personally as I was part of TAFT. Dr. David Samuel was sharing, and now with Guild. Dr. David Samuel forgot to mention those 4 A's which he regularly says, and I think I need to say it. Theological education needs to be, first of all, affordable, needs to be well accredited, it needs to be applied, and it has to be academic. I think these are the 4 A's which has to be a strong, especially in the global south, affordable. And what's happening through Guild? Action points.
What is Guild?
Sorry?
What is Guild?
Guild is an initiative called Global Institute for Leadership Development, which we started sometime last year as a point to bring a network, bring people together, theological colleges and institutions who are involved in 3 things: addressing the gaps in theological education, secondly, provide theological online resources, and thirdly, to build grassroots level training. This is the initiative. So what we have done from then, that is from March last year, is we have come to a point what we call as consortium, what some of you have been saying, south to south. So within South Asia, we're trying to bring 2 major partners who are accrediting, that is ATA and Serampur, together so that we would be able to offer some courses. Along with it, we have TAFT, an interdenominational body, and so also other Pentecostal churches. Second thing, as I said, is we are trying to provide online resources. That's an action plan that we have already started, especially in the global south, who do not have access to it. The third area that we have initiated, and which is very important, is what we call develop new courses addressing the gaps in theological curriculum. This is what we are doing. Now, I want to share what possibly needs to be done in the future. I think the future should be, I think in the past we had very categorized learning. I mean, you have classical ways of understanding theology, ethics, history, religion. These are excellent ways of learning. But I think the future is we need to have an integrated learning environment and also interdisciplinary courses, which is more important because not many of them would be wanting to do huge number of courses, but select number of courses which is able to deliver what is required. And another area is need, especially in the global south, and what we have heard is curriculum development workshops, because majority of them do not have the skills, especially in developing in emerging churches. I think this is another area which needs to be addressed. And fourthly, some of you have highlighted is, as you rightly said, resources are limited, but I think we need to look into opportunities, what we call sustainable theological teaching methods and institutions where they could be able to sustain themselves, not just bearing on. That's what is the idea that I have. I'll leave it with you. And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for all the effort done.
Thank you, Prasad. In the interest of respect for everyone's time, let's see if we can close within the next 5 to 7 minutes. And Dr. Raja will continue to leave it in your hands as how we negotiate those last minutes. Thank you.
Sure. I think I see Isabel Ferry hands up.
Yes,
Please.
I wanted to speak to the issue of remaining academic, but also socially relevant, because one of the things we have discussed is the absence of theological language in public discourse. For me, I think it's very important that as we concentrate on being academic, let us also read the signs of our times, okay, so that our theological reflection is interacting with what's happening in the global world. One example is the Sustainable Development Goals. How are we including sustainable development goals in our theological education? Because we need to develop theologians that are relevant in the society that we live in.
Brilliant. Anybody else like to say? We had a very interesting networks around the world. I think David Esterline is trying to pull it together. He said he will ask us to be part of the next meeting next year. And I think we also had Wakati. Somebody asked me to lead Wakati. Petros asked me, he's not able to do, but I said, no, not me. But I think it's there's an absence of networking around the world. And somewhere we can find a space to bring. Maybe WCC is something to think about. We will be very happy to be part of and partially kind of support some of the activities to reach out a wider ecumenical group like Pentecostal Catholics, besides all the WCC members. Just that is what I am thinking. If you pull together, we'll be very happy to be part of, even to host them. And for me, I would be very happy to even think about producing next book on TEE, which has quite a large scale increase, theological education by extension, global wise, which is a space which is absent now. And I would like to pull that together somewhere. And, we have quite good, excellent scholars in Africa and Europe and Asia and even in South America. We can pull together a book on that. If WCC considers as we will be very happy to be part of it. And I think there are a number of agencies. We even can partially a little bit of explore funding also. That's a good thinking we can think about. Yeah.
Right. I'm a student of Dr. Bernhard Ott, and I'm here in Germany. And it's the first time I join a call like that. I'm busy writing my dissertation that also looks at theological education against the background of changing world Christianity, the decline in the West and the growth in the majority world. So I am just listening in and I am very pleased to see some faces of people that I've read about or read from.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. And I think I will hand it over to Jonathan. I should say thank you very much, Jonathan, for hosting this. And this is an excellent thing, and it gives a good idea for us also to host some of the program.
Thank you, Tobias, for joining us, and please greet Dr. Ott for us. We're extremely grateful to Dr. Raja for capably leading us and presenting those stimulating ideas. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're hugely honored to have all of your time and availability for this. This is an extremely rare opportunity for us, and we respect and greatly value your time. Dr. Raja, would you close us in a word of prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for calling us and considering us to do this privileged work to promote theological education around the world. Give us your grace, wisdom, and the Holy Spirit, that we will be continuously working hard to grow and witness your reign on earth through these theological institutions, theological education, theological educators. We pray especially for those who need our prayers, especially those theological educators who are struggling in various ways, and those theological institutions who are struggling. Give us your wisdom that we will also be able to share the responsibility together as a global body of Christ. Continue to guide us, that we'll go forward, being guided by your will, your grace, your mercy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And go in peace. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.